Before we start, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any new videos. Have you ever wondered whether the country most tourists know for the beaches of Antalya and the hot air balloon photos of Cappadocia is actually one of the strangest, most tragic, and most astonishing historical theaters in the world? This is a place where 9,000 years before Christ, hunters who did not even know the wheel built a temple that completely changed our understanding of the origins of religion. A place where the saint whom the whole world renamed Santa Claus came from a small Turkish town, and whose relics were stolen by Italians. Where Christian boys were forcibly turned into Muslims, only to later rule an empire and build mosques we now call masterpieces. Where the mother of a sultan, once a Greek slave, ruled a vast empire and wove intrigues darker than anything in Game of Thrones. Where a Roman bridge became a symbol of hell, and the mountain where Noah's Ark supposedly came to rest has been closed to visitors for nearly a century, and where men still beat each other with sticks while riding horses and fighting over a bloody goat carcass, because tradition demands it. Turkey is not just a country. It is a layered cake of Bronze Age treaties, underground megacities, fratricidal laws, and alphabet revolutions. It is a place where the past has not merely survived. It literally sticks out from under your feet at every step, from the Mediterranean coast to snow-covered Mount Ararat. And the more real facts you learn, the more you realize you knew absolutely nothing about Turkey. Prepare to be amazed, because the 15 facts below are only the tip of the historical iceberg. Fact 1. The Treaty of Kadesh, the first peace agreement written on clay. Imagine the Bronze Age, where empires fought wars for decades without even remembering how they had started. The Hittite kingdom, whose capital Hattusa stood in central Anatolia, and the Egypt of Ramesses II exhausted one another in the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC, one of the largest chariot battles in history, involving up to 6,000 war chariots. Yet neither side could achieve a decisive victory. Then, around 1259 BC, something unprecedented happened. The enemies sat down at the negotiating table. The treaty was engraved on a silver tablet now lost, and on clay cuneiform tablets written in Akkadian, the international diplomatic language of the age. The terms sound astonishingly modern: mutual non-aggression, a military alliance against common enemies, extradition of political fugitives, with a promise not to torture them, and even a clause stating that if one ruler died, the other would help place his legitimate heir on the throne. Archaeologists found a clay copy of the treaty in Hattusa, preserved in the Hittite Royal Archives. It is now housed in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum, while a replica hangs at the UN headquarters in New York as a symbol of the oldest known written peace treaty. The Egyptian version carved into the walls of the Karnak Temple is triumphalist propaganda portraying Ramesses II as the victor, while the Hittite tablet honestly states that both sides had brought their forces into balance. Curiously, the Hittites, one of the earliest Indo-European peoples, even made treaties with gods. Their rituals specified that if a god broke a promise, humans had the right to complain in another temple. Fact 2. Saint Nicholas of Myra, how a bishop from the Turkish coast became Santa Claus. In the 3rd century AD, the city of Myra was a thriving port where Greek, Roman, and early Christian traditions mixed together. Nicholas, elected bishop of the city, was neither a plump old man in a red suit nor a cheerful giver of gifts. He was known for strict asceticism and a fiery temper. According to legend, at the First Council of Nicaea in 325, he struck the heretic Arius in the face during an argument and was temporarily stripped of his bishopric. But his most famous deed was the secret rescue of 3 sisters. Their father, once noble but ruined financially, planned to sell his daughters into prostitution because he could not provide dowries. Learning of this, Nicholas crept to their house at night and threw 3 bags of gold coins through the window. Or, according to another version, 1 bag each night for 3 nights. The bags landed in stockings drying near the fireplace, giving rise to the tradition of hanging stockings for gifts. After Nicholas died, his tomb in Myra became a pilgrimage site, and fragrant myrrh-like oil was said to seep from its walls with miraculous properties. In 1087, merchants from Bari, fearing Seljuk invasions, stole the saint's relics and transported them to Italy. Today, the restored Church of St. Nicholas still stands in Demre, where Orthodox liturgies are held every December 6th. Interestingly, in 2017, Turkish archaeologists claimed they had discovered an untouched burial beneath the church, possibly the real grave of Nicholas, while another bishop rests in Bari. The Vatican, however, remains silent. Fact 3. Çatalhöyük, the city without streets where people lived on rooftops. On the barren plains of Konya, where sheep graze today, life flourished 9,500 years ago. Çatalhöyük was one of the world's earliest settlements where humans became sedentary. Though not fully agricultural yet, people still hunted wild bulls, donkeys, and deer, gathered wild wheat, and even kept Persian leopards in cages, judging from the bones found there. The city had no streets or alleys. Houses were packed tightly together with blank outer walls, forming one continuous block. People walked across flat rooftops, which served as roads, and entered their homes through holes in the ceilings via wooden ladders. These openings also functioned as chimneys and sources of light. Beneath every sleeping platform, ancestors were buried. Their skulls were carefully plastered and painted with ochre to recreate the faces of the dead. House walls were covered with vivid frescoes, scenes of bull hunts, images of women with spread legs, possibly fertility goddesses, and perhaps the oldest known landscape painting in the world, depicting the erupting twin-peaked volcano Hasan Dag above a cluster of houses. The remarkable thing about Çatalhöyük is that archaeologists found neither royal palaces nor luxurious tombs. All houses were nearly identical in size and furnishings. This challenges the idea that complex societies require rigid hierarchies. Here, around 8,000 people may have lived in relative equality, probably governed by councils of elders or shaman priests. Fact 4. The Lycian tombs, stone masterpieces of the Sea of the Dead. Lycia, the ancient region between modern Antalya and Fethi, was inhabited by an Anatolian people whose language was related to Hittite. Their tombs, carved into cliffs from Dalyan to Kas, were more than burial sites. They were architectural declarations of faith. The most famous type was the boat tomb, whose facade resembled an inverted ship's keel. The Lycians believed the soul had to cross a sea to reach the Islands of the Blessed, perhaps mythological versions of Rhodes or Crete. Therefore, the tomb itself became a ship. Inside, archaeologists found jewelry, miniature oars, tiny anchors, and even amphorae filled with water. Some tombs in Myra feature stone imitations of wooden beams, preserving the appearance of Lycian timber architecture that has otherwise vanished. The richest royal tombs were carved 30 to 40 meters above the ground because the Lycians believed the higher the burial, the closer the deceased would be to the sun and the gods. Robbing them required climbing skills, yet looters still reached them, and most sarcophagi were broken open in antiquity. Some poorer tombs resemble ordinary houses with pitched roofs, used for middle-class people who could not afford a ship into the afterlife. Fact 5. Devshirme. How Christian boys became masters of an empire. In the 14th century, Ottoman Sultan Murad I legalized a practice unlike anything else in world history. Every 4 or 5 years, tax collectors appeared in Christian villages across the Balkans and Anatolia. But instead of grain, they took boys aged 8 to 18. This system was called devshirme, meaning collection. Officially, it was a blood tax, though strict rules applied. Only one boy from 40 households could be taken, only sons were spared, and neither orphans nor married boys were selected. In the capital, the boys were forcibly converted to Islam, circumcised, renamed, and educated. The brightest and most handsome entered the Enderun Palace School at Topkapi Palace, where for over a decade they studied poetry, calligraphy, archery, music, Quranic interpretation, Turkish, Arabic, Persian, and secret politics. Others became janissaries, elite infantry forbidden to marry and officially considered slaves of the Sultan, yet highly paid and capable of rising to the rank of general. Paradoxically, many parents bribed officials to take their sons. Bosnian peasants, for example, begged collectors to choose their children because within the Ottoman system, a shepherd's son could rise to become Grand Vizier or Admiral. One famous example was Sokala Mehmed Pasha, a Serbian boy from Herzegovina who became commander-in-chief and Grand Vizier under 3 sultans. Another was the architect Mimar Sinan, taken through Devshirme and later creator of the magnificent Suleimani Mosque. Yet there was also tragedy. Mothers cursed the collectors, and Balkan folk songs mourning the Devshirme were banned under Ottoman rule. Fact 6. The harem, where power belonged to the mother, not the concubines. European travelers of the 17th century imagined the harem as a fantasy palace full of half-naked women waiting for the sultan's whim. In reality, the harem was an ultra-structured female kingdom with its own bureaucracy, rituals, and hierarchy. The central figure was the Valide Sultan, the sultan's mother. She ruled over the 300 to 500 women of the harem, controlled enormous wealth, possessed estates and tax privileges, and commanded her own eunuchs. The most famous was Kozum Sultan, of Greek origin, who effectively governed the empire in place of her sons Murad IV and Ibrahim I, and later for her grandson Mehmed IV, until she was strangled during a palace conspiracy. Concubines entered the harem as slaves, bought at markets or gifted by Crimean Tatar Khans. For years they trained in cooking, music, etiquette, and court protocol. If a woman did not bear a son within 9 years, she was married off with a rich dowry to a pasha or vizier. But if she gave birth to a prince, she became a hasiki and gained political influence. Hurrem Sultan, also known as Roxolana, was a Ukrainian slave who became the legal wife of Suleiman the Magnificent, breaking a 200-year-old tradition and opening the era historians call the Sultanate of Women. Fact 7. Ani, the city of 1,000 churches destroyed by one earthquake. Near the Armenian border, high above the Akurian River, stand the ghostly ruins of Ani. In the 10th century, the capital of the Armenian Bagratid kings was known as the city of 1,001 churches and the mother of cities. Its population may have reached 100,000, enormous for medieval Europe. Silk, Persian carpets, Russian furs, and Arab coffee passed through its markets. The architects of Ani pioneered ribbed vaults and Gothic-like arches centuries before France. The city's most famous church was decorated with frescoes mixing scenes from Christ's life with portraits of donors wearing turbans, a striking blend of Christian and Islamic influences. But Ani was conquered repeatedly by Byzantines, Seljuks, Georgians, and Mongols. Churches became mosques, then stables. The fatal blow came with the devastating earthquake of 1319, which collapsed many major buildings. Merchants fled along the Silk Road to Tabriz, and the city slowly died beneath wind and dust. Today, one can wander through Ani for hours without seeing another soul. Only wolves and shepherd dogs. The half-ruined cathedral, where wind whistles through shattered arches beneath Armenian inscriptions and Arabic graffiti, remains hauntingly beautiful. Fact 8. Göbekli Tepe, the temple built before the wheel. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first saw a hill near Sanlierfa in 1994, local farmers told him, "They're just stones that break our plows." Beneath the dust lay Göbekli Tepe, a ritual complex built between 9600 and 8200 BC. It is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and 7,000 years older than the pyramids of Egypt. And who built it? Late Stone Age hunter-gatherers with no pottery, no metal, no wheel, and no writing. They carved 20-ton T-shaped limestone pillars up to 6 meters high, decorating them with reliefs of foxes, boars, cranes, spiders, and scorpions in vivid motion. Some pillars even have human arms carved across their bellies, perhaps depicting ancestral spirits. The strangest fact is that there is almost no evidence of permanent settlement nearby. No hearths, no garbage pits, no homes. People likely lived in tents or caves and gathered here only for rituals. After a structure was used, it was deliberately buried with stones and another built on top. Klaus Schmidt argued that Göbekli Tepe may have been the world's first temple, and that religion, not agriculture, pushed humans to domesticate wheat and sheep in order to feed crowds of builders. Fact 9. The Law of Fatih legalized fratricide in the Ottoman dynasty. In 1478, Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, issued a decree that still chills historians. "Whichever of my sons Allah grants the sultanate, it shall be lawful for him, for the sake of world order, to execute his brothers." Mehmed believed this was practical, not cruel. Since the Ottoman Empire had no fixed succession law, princes often plunged the state into civil war. One example was the 6-year conflict between Bayezid II and his brother Sem. The bloodiest ruler was Selim I, who executed all his brothers and their children, even drowning a 3-year-old nephew in a bath. Yet, because he eliminated rebellions and doubled the empire's territory within 8 years, many subjects called him the Just. In 1595, Murad III ordered the killing of 19 brothers, some still infants. They were strangled with silk cords so royal blood would not be spilled. The law was finally abolished in 1617 by Mustafa I, partly because he himself had survived confinement in the infamous Kafes, a windowless prison where Ottoman princes spent years descending into madness while waiting to be killed or crowned. Fact 10. The Alphabet Revolution: How Turkey Learned to Read in 1 year. In 1928, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk launched what linguists call the fastest literacy reform in history. Ottoman Turkish had used the Arabic script for 700 years, but Arabic writing poorly represented Turkish vowels. Different words could appear almost identical in writing. Ataturk formed a commission that adapted the Latin alphabet in only 3 months, adding letters such as O, U, C, S, I, and G. On November 1, 1928, Parliament approved the new script. 2 days later, Ataturk personally walked through Istanbul with chalk and a blackboard, teaching citizens the new letters. Across the country, people's houses turned mosques, caravanserais, and schools into literacy centers for adults. Teachers traveled village to village, writing letters on walls and cafe tables. By the end of 1929, millions had learned the new alphabet, and literacy rates soared dramatically over the following decade. Yet the reform also created absurd scenes. Elderly religious scholars burned books in Arabic script, while imams struggled to read Friday sermons written phonetically in Latin letters. Ataturk famously declared, "A nation that cannot read its own newspaper cannot call itself civilized." Fact 11. Derinkuyu, an underground skyscraper for 20,000 people. In 1963, a man in Cappadocia knocked down a wall in his basement and discovered a tunnel stretching for kilometers. This led to the discovery of Derinkuyu Underground City, the largest of more than 200 underground cities in Cappadocia. Descending 85 meters underground, it could shelter up to 20,000 people along with livestock, grain, and wine. Massive circular stone doors, weighing 500 kilograms, could seal entrances from the inside. The upper levels housed sheep and goats, so invaders would hear animal sounds and assume the city was abandoned. Lower levels contained churches, schools, wineries, oil presses, storage chambers, and sophisticated ventilation shafts that kept fresh air circulating even 80 meters underground. People sometimes lived here for months during invasions by Arabs, Persians, Mongols, and others. The earliest chambers may have been carved by the Hittites around 1500 BC, later expanded by Roman Christians and Byzantines. Greek families reportedly used Derinquiu as a refuge for the last time during the population exchanges of 1923. Fact 12. Tulum butter. Butter churned by a galloping horse. For centuries, the nomadic Turkmen known as Yoriks migrated between summer and winter pastures across the Taurus Mountains. Hanging from the side of a saddle was a tulum, a bag sewn from an entire goat skin with the fur turned inward. Into it they poured cow, sheep, or goat milk, sometimes mixed with yogurt starter. As the horse trotted and galloped all day, the milk shook continuously until by evening it had separated into butter, floating in buttermilk. The nomad would pour off the aran, wash the butter in a mountain stream, and wrap it in burdock leaves. The result could survive for weeks in the heat. It carried a distinctive flavor of leather and wild herbs such as thyme, mint, and wild dill. Today, this traditional tulum butter survives only in a few villages near Konya and Kayseri, and has become one of Turkey's most expensive dairy products. Buffalo milk butter is even more unusual. Instead of shaking it in a tulum, villagers churn it by hand in ceramic pots for hours because the milk is so rich. The resulting butter is snow white and melts instantly in the mouth. Fact 13. The Bridge of Sirat, a real ancient bridge that became a symbol of hell. In Islamic belief, the Bridge of Sirat is thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword, stretched across hell itself. After resurrection, every soul must cross it. The righteous fly over like birds, while sinners fall into the abyss. In eastern Turkey, in the gorge of Nemrut Kalisi, there survives a Roman bridge from the 2nd century AD built under Emperor Septimius Severus to move legions across the Euphrates. Its single arch spans a terrifying 60-meter chasm. Medieval Armenians and later Turks became convinced this was the earthly image of the Sirat Bridge. Arab geographers called it Jisr al-Abwab, the Bridge of Gates. According to local legend, anyone who crosses it on a moonless night without looking back may glimpse the flames of hell below. In reality, the glow comes from gases and swarms of fireflies rising from the gorge. Kurdish shepherds still tell stories that during fighting between Turkish forces and the PKK in the 1980s, soldiers who fell from the bridge were said by local mullahs to have fallen from Sirat before their appointed time. Today the bridge remains a dangerous tourist attraction with nearly rotten railings. Fact 14. Ararat, the mountain that hides Noah's Ark and is closed to everyone. The Bible says, "And the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat." For Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, this has traditionally meant Mount Ararat, the dormant volcano rising 5,137 meters above eastern Anatolia. Its snow-covered summit is visible from more than 150 kilometers away. Yet almost the entire mountain lies within Turkey, near the Armenian and Iranian borders. After the Armenian genocide and later conflicts, Turkey declared Ararat a restricted military zone in the 1930s, officially because of Kurdish rebellions and weapon smuggling. Unofficially, Turkish authorities feared Armenian nationalist pilgrimages to the mountain. Between 1933 and 1992, only a handful of expeditions received permission to climb it, usually under military supervision. In the 2000s, explorers claimed to have discovered fossilized wooden beams high on the mountain, allegedly remnants of Noah's Ark, though the evidence remains highly controversial. Kurdish villagers near Bayezid confidently point to unusual rock formations and a lake they identify as the Ark's resting place. Even today, climbing Ararat involves months of bureaucracy, mandatory Turkish guides, and strict controls. Fact 15. Jared, the deadly horseman's game of the goat carcass. In the freezing highlands of Erzurum, where winters last half the year, men invented a brutal game to survive boredom and cold. Jared is a full-contact equestrian sport involving teams of horsemen fighting over a headless goat carcass, nowadays often replaced with a leather sack filled with sand. Riders gallop at full speed, lean from their saddles to grab the heavy bundle with one hand, and try to carry it into their side scoring circle while opponents strike them with long wooden sticks. Almost any blow is permitted except direct hits to the head. During Ottoman times, matches took place every Friday after prayers, and injuries were common: broken limbs, shattered skulls, and trampled riders. Mahmud II banned the game in 1826 alongside the destruction of the Janissaries because the matches frequently turned into riots. Yet the tradition survived in remote mountain villages. Today, annual championships are still held in Bayburt. Riders wear traditional costumes, women cheer from rooftops, and the winner receives not money, but a silver belt, a horse, and the honor of carving the ceremonial ram at the feast. The most feared tactic is the trip, throwing a stick beneath an opponent's horse, so both horse and rider crash into the snow. No helmets, no padding, only skill and luck. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. Write in the comments which country you want to see next, and what facts you're most curious about. See you in the next episode.